Hey everybody, it's First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Penner. Thought I'd do a Friday weather vlog talking about the weekend setup for some rain and kind of dispel some of the myths. It's kind of crazy. I think this happens every winter, but I'm thinking that most people are starting to catch on though that if they don't hear it from a source like a meteorologist that's local, they kind of take it with a grain of salt, which is good news. I'm actually encouraged by what I'm seeing, but I'll kind of explain why you probably heard some of that stuff floating around and why it's actually not going to happen. And I'll explain all that in my video here. So first of all, the one thing we noticed is we had a huge cool down. The temperatures have actually flipped back to average. It seems like this is brutally cold, but this is actually where we should be. In fact, today might actually be slightly above average, just a degree or two, but that's kind of a big deal because that would keep our stretch of consecutive days above average going at 27. Here's our storm system. So this is the one that caused all the uproar. But if you see, all the winter weather's up here, and if I watch this loop, the most of the energy is moving here. This is all rain down here. Now, when I say warm in the winter time, I'm not referring to the 70s we just had. I'm saying it's warm enough that it's not going to be ice, sleet, or snow. And so I don't want to make it seem like it's going to be a mild weekend, but it's going to be warm enough that most of us are just going to see rain as this thing heads our way. Now, I'm going to pause this and turn on the temperatures because just to show you how cold it is today. I mean, we haven't been below 50 degrees in about a week. We haven't been below freezing in about 8 days. So the fact that we woke up this morning to 30s and 40s, certainly been a cold day. We've also got a northeast wind, and the dew points are really low as well. These are the dew points. That's really dry air. The one thing about this recent warm-up, it was kind of muggy. We had really high moisture levels, so this is really dry air. So if you have dry skin or you notice that things are kind of itchy today or you're susceptible to that, that's why the air is much drier today, especially if you heat it up in your house. That further dries it out inside. That's why humidifiers are a big deal. But the good news is this will help dry out all the moisture that we've had over the last couple of weeks. So let me show you what's going to happen here over the next 24 hours as this system to the west heads our way. I'm going to turn on the advisories here. Hopefully they pop up real quickly. We do have winter weather advisories for parts of the mountains. Now, this includes Watauga, Ashe, Wilkes, Allegheny County, and then areas going up into southwest Virginia. This will likely be extended down in here. Now, the primary reason we're seeing a winter weather advisory, not for a ton of snow, and I'm going to show you why. This is mainly for ice, and that's the thing about this setup. This was never going to be snow. If it was going to be cold enough, it was probably going to be ice because of the way the atmosphere was set up. So that's what further puzzled me about this talk of snow this weekend, because the atmosphere just wasn't set up for snow in this scenario. So let me show you what happens as the system approaches from the west. Okay, let's talk about Futurecast. All of the guidance heading our way, showing this rain moving in from the west. And at the same time, remember, we've got high pressure and control pumping in cold, dry air at the surface. So really dry air and temperatures probably in the 30s and 40s. So as this first batches of moisture move in later tonight, and again, this is showing up on our model, but none of this will be reaching the ground. The air is just too dry. This will be virga. And some of you actually saw a little bit of this today in the clouds. I got some great pictures of these wispy, looks like ice falling from the clouds. That's actually kind of what this is. This is moisture falling from the high-level clouds, but evaporating, or if it's ice, it's called sublimation, basically evaporating before it reaches the ground. So we'll see that today. None of this really reaches the ground tonight, and even early tomorrow. This doesn't really start developing until probably after sunrise. So this is about 8:45 in the morning. Notice we're pretty dry, but moisture's moving in. So this moisture comes in from the west. We've still got some cold air trying to pump in, but that cold air is actually moving out pretty quickly. So you just have the residual cold, dry air trapped near the surface. So as this moisture comes in, it falls into that dry air, it evaporates, it cools the air. So just like when you get out of the shower, the tub, or the pool in the summer, and you have a chill because your skin is wet, that's water evaporating from your skin. When that happens in the atmosphere, it actually causes the air temperature to cool, but only to a certain point. That's why those dew point temperatures are really important. When the dew point temperature is really low, the air actually can cool all the way down to that temperature. So like a dew point in the teens can actually make the air pretty cold. But what happens is as the things evaporate, the dew point comes up and the temperature drops until they meet. And if they meet at freezing or lower, you've got problems. But if they meet just above freezing, then you don't have problems. And we call that kind of the wet bulb temperature. And we kind of see that today where we don't see that wet bulb temperature being below 32 degrees. In fact, it's probably going to be in the mid to upper 30s. So you see a lot of rain here. But these kind of red areas, that's where we expect ice. So icing on some higher elevations here, especially in the mountains and foothills. There could be snow mixing in. I certainly am not going to discount snow or sleet, but this really looks like a rain to ice type event. And notice it's all rain for Charlotte. This is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And obviously, as we go later in the day, it warms up even more in the lowest level, so we're nowhere near freezing. As we go through time, you just see rain or ice. And the ice is only here in the mountains. You don't see anything across the Piedmont. And then eventually the system moves out. So, and I could show you every single model I have at my disposal. It shows identical thing. There is not a single piece of data showing snow tomorrow. That's why I'm so puzzled on why that ended up getting spread all over social media. Is there a small chance of ice? Yes, I'd say there's a percentage, single percentage chances, but I'm not going to talk about single percentages. I'm going to go with the most likely scenario, which is over 90% probability of all rain, except for the mountains where we are going to watch for some ice. And even there, it's like a 50-50 rain ice mix and only in elevated surfaces. So it's really interesting how this stuff kind of goes. And I think it has a lot to do with how websites are built, and some of this is automation. If you ever see an article mentioning snow, make sure there's a name and face associated with that forecast. If it just says forecasters or they are saying, that's usually a red flag to me, because that's just a no-name person, and usually means it didn't come from anybody. It came from an app or a model or a website and not an actual person. A lot of these like newspaper articles and stuff online, they could save themselves a lot of trouble by just picking up the phone or emailing or DMing a meteorologist and say, hey, what's up with this? And they would tell them immediately, hey, it's nothing. That's just a product of how the website is done. So that's kind of what's going to happen. And just to show you another perspective on why this happens, this is another model site which I really like to show because I can show the soundings. What I'm going to do is pop up a sounding here for Charlotte to kind of show you the atmospheric profile temperature. So down at the ground, you can see the air temperature is 36, but as you go up in height, the air temperature actually gets higher. So down here, it's 36, which is just above freezing. But up here around 1 kilometer, just, less than a mile, the temperature is actually well into the 40s. We call this a warm nose because it looks like a nose, like a profile of a nose. And when we see that above our heads, that's no snow. That could be freezing rain if the surface temperature gets cold enough, near freezing, and then you would get some ice. And just to show you a good example, the Weather Service has a great example. This is what a sounding of the atmosphere looks like if it's all snow. The entire profile of the atmosphere is below freezing. You can be a little bit warmer near the ground, but up here where the clouds are, it's got to be in this cold section. It can't be above freezing. So that's typically what a snow sounding looks like. Ice or sleet, we typically have freezing way up high, and then there's a very small warm nose, but it's way up in the atmosphere. So what happens is the snowflakes fall, they melt in this warm layer, and then they refreeze in this layer that's cold near the surface. So that's kind of a sleet setup, and we see that quite a bit. Freezing rain, you can see how warm it is above our heads. This is why this is the only precipitation at the surface you actually require freezing temperatures, because it needs to refreeze. So above our heads, you've got rain falling up here at several 1,000 feet above our head, and then near the ground, it's just below freezing, and that ice or the rain doesn't have time to refreeze. It gets everything wet, and then it freezes after it falls. So that warm nose we talk about right here is this thing. So it looks like a nose. If this is someone's eye and face, and their mouth is down here, that's a horrible drawing, but you get the idea. That's a warm nose, we call it, with the nose sticking out. And then I like to turn the hurricane one because we call them warm core. Warm core systems like hurricanes are actually, as you go up in the atmosphere, the temperature doesn't really cool down much until you get way up high in the atmosphere. So that's kind of cool. But this is the setup we have, either freezing rain or all rain, there's not even a sleet sounding, and it's certainly not snow. So if you ever wonder why we see the atmosphere set up certain ways and why it's so difficult to forecast, because I know there's going to be clouds and precipitation in the area on Saturday, and I know it's not going to be snow, but there's certain times where the difference between 32.0 and 32.1 is the difference between rain, snow, and sleet. I think people forget it's a tenth of a degree. 32.1 is not freezing. 32.0 is. And that altitude of that freezing level has a huge implication. So you can see all the complications. The atmosphere is very dynamic. It's a 3D body. It's a fluid. So it is difficult to forecast. But this weekend's actually pretty straightforward. It's just going to be a miserable cold rain on Saturday with a little bit of mountain ice, and then it's out of here. Hope that explains it. This was a much longer video than I expected, but I like to explain these things and kind of tell you what's going to happen. Of course, I'll be posting updates throughout the day and tonight, and you can see me on TV tonight at 4, 5, and 6 on WCNC Charlotte. See you then.